Hi, this is Mr. Agler again. So I don't know if I'm going to add this to the back of the tutorial for the birch tree or if I'm going to make this its own tutorial. Um, but what I wanted to do was do a quick one that addressed like the bark of this tree, especially the birch tree because it's so unique. Um, you have that white and dark ashy colors in the tree bark, and you also have these like striations that appear. And so what I want to do is I just want to do like a really quick demo on the side that's a little bit larger. So I'm going to zoom in real fast and just so we can get a good size of this. And just look at different approaches. Because right now we've been looking at drawing like the overall tree, but sometimes you need to draw an element that's up close. And for me, the birch tree is pretty easy as far as when you're looking at elements that you're going to draw. And there's a lot of bumps and grooves. So here's a mistake some people might make. There are bumps and grooves on the tree bark that you can see that come off the edges, but I don't want to draw those. I want to instead just draw my shape first. And you might not be able to see it on camera, or it's going to be very, very light. And like I said before in other videos, I'm not trying to do an exact representation of the tree. I just want to get like the gist of it. I'm just going to put this in here. And the thing that about the birch tree is different. It's a very narrow trunk and they're very tall. Usually trees that get tall and vertical, they tend to have a much thicker trunk. And I don't know enough about trees. I don't know why the birch tree has such a thin trunk and grows so tall. But they are interesting, and you'll see a lot of them used in artwork. They have interesting patterns. There's an artist called Bev Doolittle. You can look her up. She does a lot of stuff with the birch trees and forests. She also likes to mix those with horses that have similar coloring running through the forest with the birch trees. So she likes to do like the optical illusion. Always fun artwork to look at. Now, once I have my shape, any type of striations that I see, I can just kind of go in. And again, I'm going to keep it light. I'll zoom in just a little bit so you guys can see this. You can see like the little wobbly edges. It's nothing too dramatic. And then you could just go through and add some more random ones. This is the great thing about stuff in nature, especially like trees. They're so random that you can add little things and they look perfectly normal. Like you wouldn't do this someone's skin, right? If this was someone's arm, you wouldn't be drawing these little grooves and you wouldn't have stuff coming in at weird angles. You wouldn't have any little bumps because that's not indicative of human skin or body parts. But with a tree, you can get really inventive. And that's why I like looking at you have movies like Avatar, and you have other movies, especially science fiction movies that are set in different planets. And what do those trees look like on those planets? What does the fauna look like? And you can get really inventive. Even in movies like the Harry Potter films, which are based on magic, they have magical trees in the movies. So you can really let your mind explore and go off and do some crazy things because there's not a whole lot of restrictions. And I think that's a lot where people get caught up. Now, when you look in the shadows, and there's certain areas like there's this bump here, and then in between this bump, and there's a little one right here, you see this like shape coming in, and that's like a tear in the bark, and you can see where it juts out because there's a shadow. I could indicate stuff like that, and then it's coming in here, And I think the one thing to keep in mind is you're just kind of indicating stuff that you see. You're not trying to get too precise or too exact. Again, anytime you try to make something look exactly like something else. So like if I want to make this sketch look exactly like the tree that I'm looking at in the photograph, it would take a considerable more amount of time for me to do it. Whereas if I just look at some main components and say, okay, I'm going to draw this main component here, and then there's like a little branch coming off, and you know what, this branch is coming off a little bit differently. So let's see, what am I looking at? What I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly just draw this shape in, and then I will come off and then I could just erase this little part. Okay, so again, I'm just indicating any type of like main parts that I see. I'll just indicate those. Those are easy enough, and then you guys can see them in the picture. And again, I'm looking at the edge, fairly smooth. There's some wobbles here and there. You could add more. And now I see the shadow, and I have the shadow playing. So there is a certain thickness to the shadow. So I can come in, right, and this is showing some roundness to it. And I can lightly indicate part of the shadow that I see. So this is jutting out, and this is casting a shadow right here. And I say this over and over again. Don't go too dark too fast. Okay, just put enough in there that acts kind of like a map to what you're doing. And I know that this shadow is much thicker, but I'm just kind of laying out where I'm going to work out of. So more often than not, when you're drawing, especially on like a light surface like white paper, you want to draw coming out of the shadows, because you're saying like the paper's your highlights. And then what I'm going to do now is I just want to go in, and again, I'm going to kind of look at this. There is like a scar on the tree, or this could be a shadow. This is probably a shadow from the branch, and the other shadow's coming here. And then I have like little notches. And then these little dots that you see, I'll come in later and do those. I'm not worried about those right now. So you got, this is right about here. And I'm just indicating some of the main parts I see on the tree landmarks. They're easy to identify, and there's stuff coming off. You got some stuff here. You have some stuff here. The nice thing about, the thing I like about well, anything in general, but the trees, is once I get used to like the marks that you typically going to see on a type of tree, in this case a birch tree, I can recreate those or make those on my own without having to really look at a birch tree. If I just want to kind of indicate that there is birch trees in the illustration, trees are easy enough to fake. They're one of the few things that you can completely fake and get away with, and people aren't going to know any difference. Versus drawing like a portrait. Portrait, you need reference, you need that person. What I have found too is I've done a few portraits of animals, and I never really put much thought into animals. To me, like a dog is a dog. So like if you draw a bulldog, it looks like a bulldog. If you draw a Boston Terrier, it looks like a Boston. You draw a lab, it looks like a lab. But the more animals that I've drawn, the more I realize you can draw fairly accurate portraits of an animal, like the actual animal, like not just the breed. Because I have my friend's dog that I got bored one day, and I just decided to draw the dog. And by the time I was done, it's like, oh wow, this actually doesn't look like a Boston Terrier. It looks like Riley, the Boston Terrier. It looks like the dog. So I always thought, that's a little bit interesting. So again, you have some of these marks, and the thing about these dark marks, they're going to be your dark values. So you can always add them in later. But some of them, like the bark is playing off of it. So like right here, the bark is actually playing off of that. So once I have this kind of laid out the way I want, I'm going to borrow from the other tree. I'm going to add a little bit of stuff here and there. I went higher than this tree in the pictures, but I can steal from the next tree over, and you would never know. So here's my layout. It doesn't look like much yet. I know where my shadows are. I can come in here and I can bold this line a little bit now that I have it done. I'm going to say a little bit back on my pencil. I have less control. I can't draw a fine line like this, but I want less control because I want that less control to be seen in my strokes. It's going to produce a lot of irregularities. Thing about trees is the more irregularities you have, the more realistic it's going to look. People know trees are highly irregular. Okay, people know this. So I'm going to stay zoomed in a bit. Try not to go off paper. I'm just going to start attacking. And we talk about in my class, there's a push and pull technique. Now, I'll go down here in the corner. Pull technique means you're pulling towards you. And you can get these type of strokes. A push technique means you're pushing away from you. Now, when you look at this bark, it has a lot of striations. You don't really want to go like this, right? I really don't want to do this with the striations. So I'm going to look at it and say, okay, so what are some of my points? I want to see where some of the things are. And at this point, what I really want to avoid is I'm going to look at the gist of these lines, but I'm just going to kind of like, and I look at some of the stuff that I drew. And I'll use that push and pull technique right there. So anytime I see anything that might lead to a like a striation or a another line, I'll add that in. And you just work your way back and forth. And you see some of these striations in the tree. So I'm going to point it out right now. See how some of them are a little bit thicker? Some of them are thin. So you got a little thicker here, thicker, thicker, thicker. And then you got these little thin ones. Thin, 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 thin. And then you got thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thick, thin, thick. So you can just come in and start laying out some of like your main ones that you want. And then I'm just going to use that push technique and a little bit of the pull, because I'm going to come from this side too. And the nice thing is I'm going to work out of that shape right there, because I know that shape is going to be dark. And the nice thing is when I'm done with this, I can adjust my values. So even though that tree looks really white and like the highlights seem really white, like it was in direct light, you could still get away with rendering a little bit of value on your paper. And you can go back in and just really start matching your values. So you can see how my initial value was much lighter than some of those values I was putting in there. And then I'm just going to come in and just work my way in and out. So I wanted to show you a little bit of like the approach. And so what I'm going to do now is I think I'm just going to work a little bit on this right here. Then I'm going to give myself like a visual marker. And I'll just do like a speed up version of this. But I want you guys to see part of that technique and how it works. Other thing to keep in mind, you need slight curves on this. These can't be just straight across. The tree is round. So if you go just like, if you try to do just stuff that's straight across, and then see like right there, say I have like 3 lines in a row. I don't want all 3 lines in a row. So I'm going to take that one out before I move on. And then I'll add some other ones. Which brings me up to my next point. You're going to want to move around, because if you stay in one area, you're going to basically just start creating a pattern, and it's going to look like you just did a pattern all the way down, and you don't want that. So indicate my value here. So I like to jump around a bit, and then I'll take a step back. I'll look at the whole thing. And then I'll go right back into it. I'm going to lay the shadow in. And the shadow coming here. And that's from this tree branch right here. I'll come back later and attack this tree branch. I think when I attack when I go ahead and attack this branch a little bit, I'll come back to the film so I can talk about, okay, what am I going to do for this branch? Right now I just want to indicate that base. And then I'm going to come in, there's a little discoloration little thing here. And see, like right there, that needs to be a little, and then I got this. So the pencil is going to act as my marker. At this point, I'm just going to speed it up, and you guys will see the rest of the video. All right, I think I'm gonna stop at this point. It got a little wonky right in here. I like this area a lot. I think this came out good. This bottom part came out fine. Um, there are still little things like there's little like I don't know, tree freckles. I don't know what you would call them, but they're they're just around. You could add those in afterwards. Uh, try to look at reference tree so you can be random. You don't want to you don't want to create like a freckle pattern on here. So I just look and see, okay, where are some of these specks happening? How are they grouped? Some are smaller than others. Some of them have little lines coming off. So I'm just going to go around. And then here's the other thing I think. If there's a line you don't like or a mark you don't like, put a freckle there. Don't like that, put a freckle there. Anything that kind of looks weird, put in those freckles there. Use this to hide anything you don't like. And chances are anything like this, you're only going to be the only one who sees it, right? Other people are not going to see it. That just goes to being, your own worst critic. And I don't want to add too many of them, but I want to add enough to where it looks realistic. Then I said I was going to come up to this little branch up here. So you can see that the texture on here is going to be a lot different. So I have this branch coming up, and I'm going to be really kind of rough putting my lines in. I'll just leave it like that. I'm not going to get too much into this. Okay, so there's my kind of roughed in fast. I see little areas that I might want to add to, like those little freckle things. Like right in here, there's a bunch more coming off. Let's see, right off of this, there's like a bunch coming off. Add a little bit more there. Okay, so I'm going to stop the tutorial right there, and I'll either make this its own separate one, or I'll just add it to the back end of the other one. It really depends on how long the video is going to be. So till next time, this is Mr. Aguilar, and I hope you got something out of this tutorial.